Welcome back for Keepers Audiobook's Lodestar, chapters 81 and 82. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. And let's go. "We have to get you to Elwyn," Sophie said, dropping to her knees and trying to make sense of what she was seeing. There was so much red dripping from his mouth, streaming down his arms and forehead. But the real problem was his abdomen. Aubrey was doing her best to keep the pressure on the wound, but the gash was so wide and so deep and near so many important organs. "Elwyn can't help," Mr. Forkle said. "Trust me. I know enough about these things. Sometimes there is no fix, even for elves. This is my swan song." Sophie shook her head, grabbing a tablecloth off one of the fallen tables. "Help me lift him, Keith, and then go get Elwyn. If I tie this around his waist, it should hold enough pressure on the wound to give you guys time to get here. Bring Physic, too, and a couple of goblins to carry him. And, Miss Foster, this is one of the times when your stubbornness isn't going to make a difference," Mr. Forkle interrupted. "I've had the same conversation with Aubrey. You have to let me go." "No!" Tears leaked down Sophie's cheeks. "No, they don't get to do this. They don't get to take you." "It won't be as bad as you think." His voice had a horrible gurgle to it, but Sophie ordered herself not to think about it. "I don't understand his wound," she told Aubrey. "It almost looks like he's been stabbed." Aubrey looked away. "It's okay. I'll tell her," Mr. Forkle said, reaching for Sophie's hands. They were so cold and slick and red. It made it hard to listen, as he said, "This is mostly my fault. You kept trying to tell me that Gethin was important, and I kept stalling, focusing on the wrong things. I should have been at a cell every day, fighting my way into his mind. I don't understand. Did Gethin—" Aubrey nodded. "The sword." That was all she could get out, but it was enough. As Gethin had broken the castle apart, he must have freed the sword in his cell. "But wouldn't it be ironic if someday I used the blade to chop off your pretty head? He came to make good on his threat," Mr. Forkle wheezed. "But I blocked him with a clever mind trick. The same one, incidentally, I used to make him back off that day at your human home, when he was dressed as a jogger and tried to take you away. And when I took out Brant, Gethin didn't like that. So he got me back." "Wait, you took out Brant?" Keith asked, his eyes widening when Aubrey pointed to a cloth-wrapped lump in the corner, definitely body size. "Mr. Forkle shoved him away from me, right as a huge chunk of the ceiling fell," Aubrey whispered, pressing a fresh part of cloth over his oozing wound. "And you're sure Brant's really—" Keith asked. "After Finton—" Aubrey nodded. "His skull was crushed completely, gray matter everywhere." Something felt wrong with this new information, but Sophie couldn't piece it together. All she could hear were Mr. Forkle's labored breaths, growing slower and wetter and heavier. It was hard to see past the blood, but his body seemed to be in a strange in-between state, like the ruckleberries were wearing off, but hadn't completely. "I need you three to promise me something," he rasped. "I need you to remove my body from here. Don't let anyone see it. And you must promise you won't do a planting in the Wanderling Woods. No one can know." "Won't they have to know, though?" Sophie asked, "when the other youths disappear?" "The collective has always had a contingency plan. You'll see it soon enough. And don't worry, they'll make sure you still get the answers I owe you. Secrets never die." He pressed something cold and round into her palm, and Sophie realized it was the gadget where he stored the things he wanted to remember. "Give that to Granite." He turned to Counselor Aubrey. "And make me a seed. Coil it with my hair. And bring it to Miss Foster to keep safe. She'll know when and where to plant it." "How?" Sophie asked. "And why are we talking about this? You're not dying." "Yes, I am. But it's okay. I've done far more with this life than I ever could have imagined. I've lived 5 lives. I'm ready to surrender them. But before I do, I need you to promise you won't let this change you. Don't fall down the bitter, angry hole that death opens up inside of us. It's not a productive place to be, and there's no reason for it. I promise, I've made my peace. I've won more times than I've lost. I can be happy with that. Please, be happy with me." His eyes begged Sophie to assure him, but she couldn't make her mouth form words. It was too much, too hard. Mr. Forkle grabbed Keith's hands. "She needs you now, more than ever. Don't let this break her." "I won't," Keith promised. Mr. Forkle nodded, closing his eyes as he reached for Aubrey. "Take care of my moonlark." "No," Sophie said, shaking his shoulders. "Don't give up. Just hold on a little longer. Time is a funny thing. Once it's gone, it's gone. But then it passes to someone else. You'll do great things, Sophie. Wonderful, incredible things. I'm sorry I won't be there to see them, but don't let that stop you from living them. Dream, fight, love, take risks, allow yourself to be happy." "There has to be something we can do," Sophie argued. "You've already done it," he said. "Thank you for being brave enough to find me this one last time. You gave me the gift of goodbye." He coughed again, a horrible rattly sound, and Sophie was crying too hard to hear him take his final breath. But she saw his chest fall still, felt Keith's arms wrap around her, letting her fall apart on his shoulder as he held on tight, keeping her together. Chapter 82. Aubrey kept her promises, somehow making Mr. Forkle's body disappear from Luminaria, and Brant's as well, before the dwarves arrived to help them out of the rubble. And a few days later, she visited Sophie at Havenfield and gave her the Wanderling seed, tucked inside a golden locket for Sophie to wear. Now that the new security measures had been completed, gates even higher than those at Everglen, plus a whole host of underground defenses, Sophie was back living at home, trying not to feel haunted by memories. "You know what the worst part is?" she whispered as Aubrey turned to leave. "I don't even know which him this tree will be." Aubrey hesitated a second, then stepped close and pulled Sophie into a hug. "I bet that's why he gave you the seed," she whispered. "When the time comes, it'll be one final secret you share together." "Maybe," Sophie mumbled. "Most days all I can think about is that he'll never see me heal Prentice. After all these years, he waited." Aubrey cleared her throat, slowly pulling away. "Any word from the collective on their contingency plan?" "Not yet. She'd passed Mr. Forkle's gadget along to Granite, but as far as she knew, he hadn't tried to access it. They're being super vague, but I guess I should get used to that. Orly smiled sadly. Sometimes it's good when things don't change. And sometimes they have to. Change was definitely a theme in the elven world. It was too early to tell if the attack at Luminaria would bring all the leaders closer or farther apart. For the moment, they were working together to help the council rebuild and recover. Elwyn and Dex were collaborating on a prosthetic leg for Councillor Tarek, and the dwarves and gnomes were still cleaning up the rubble. But nothing would ever be the same. Sophie spent most of her days at home, hiding under the swaying branches of Callus Panic's tree, listening to the gentle songs of the leaves, and trying not to wonder if things would have been different if she'd thought to carry some of the healing blossoms with her. Her friends visited, of course, Keith more than any. He seemed to take his promise to Mr. Forkle very seriously. He wouldn't tell Sophie where he was staying, claiming it was safer if she didn't know, but he assured her that the collective had set him up somewhere the Neverseen and his mom wouldn't be able to find him. His new goal was never ignore anything, and he'd started making long lists of things he'd remembered, either from his past or from his time with the Neverseen. It wasn't accomplishing much, but it made him feel better, and Sophie wanted to be prepared as much as possible before they contacted Keith's mom to find out what she wanted from her son. Fitz was also a frequent visitor, and he kept his visits more casual, usually showing up to bring a thoughtful little gift to make her smile. That day, he'd outdid himself, bringing her a sparkly red dragon charm he'd named Minnie Snuggles. Bianna thought she'd remembered you had a charm bracelet, he told her, as he placed the tiny red dragon in her gloved hand. I do. Grady and Edeline had bought it for her when they'd believed she was dead, as a way to commemorate their visits to her wanderling, and Mr. Forkle had used it to sneak her secret messages a few times. But Sophie decided it was probably better not to share any of those less than cheerful memories and tarnish his amazing gift. He sat down beside her, leaning against Callus' tree and studying the image she'd been staring at in her memory log. 4 black-cloaked figures leaping away from the destruction of Luminaria. 4. She was positive she hadn't imagined it. Vinton, Rye, Gethin, and who? She'd assumed it was Brant, but now she knew he'd been dead by then. So who else could it have been? It was possible that Alvar had met up with them, but Sophie had a much more terrifying theory. The goblins had told her there was another prisoner in that dungeon, connected to the Forgotten Secret, and no other bodies had been found in the rubble. When she'd told Orly her theory, the pink-cheeked counselor had blanched and made Sophie promise not to tell anyone. But Sophie always shared things with her friends. None of them had been happy to hear that they might be facing a mysterious new enemy, but Keith had been quick to point out that the caches could hold the prisoner's identity. Dex was already working hard, trying to break through the cache's security, and Sophie had no doubt he'd figure it out. You know, I've been thinking, Fitz said, silencing her thoughts, as he closed the memory log and set it aside for the day. You owe me a favor. I do? Yep. We made a deal, remember? If you didn't call in your favor from me in 1 month, the favor became mine. And I hate to break it to you, but it's been way more than a month. Sophie sighed. I knew that deal was going to come back to haunt me. I should have just made something up and gotten a favor out of it. You probably should have, but you didn't, so I win. He shook his hair, flashing his most adorably confident smile. And I gotta say, I kinda get why you hesitated with this. It's a big decision. I mean, on one hand, I could go for the obvious and make you share whatever secret you keep almost telling me. Sophie's mouth turned to sandpaper. So that still freaks you out, huh? That might be proof that it needs to happen. He locked his eyes onto hers, refusing to let her look away. And when she swallowed, it was so loud she was sure the entire world heard it. Or, he said, we could skip the talking. And do what? She asked, hating her voice for cracking. Any ideas? He was so close now. She could feel his breath warming her cheeks. He leaned a tiny bit closer, and someone cleared their throat. Very loudly. Am I interrupting something? Keith asked. He'd raised one teasing eyebrow, but he wasn't smiling, and he was fidgeting a lot. Fitz leaned back against the tree again, his casual posture not matching his scowl. Just finding new ways to drive Sophie crazy. I had to step up my game while you were gone. What about you? Is that another list? Sophie asked, pointing to the paper in Keith's hands. Somehow the question made Keith look even more miserable, and he twisted the page so tightly it looked ready to shred. Okay, this is just a memory, so try not to freak out until we really think it through, he said carefully. I almost don't want to tell you, but I don't want to find out I was right and regret it later. Yeah, you're definitely freaking me out, Sophie told him. He took a deep breath. Fine. Here goes. You told me King Dimitar thinks the ogres who attacked Havenfield were actually after Lady Cadence, and I couldn't figure out what about that bugged me. But I realized today that if Dimitar is right, and the attack wasn't about Grady and Adeline, that means the Neverseen never went after your family. And I know I heard them talk about it. A lot. That's what this whole list is. 11 different times when they mention a plan for your family. So what are you saying? Fitz asked. Keith closed his eyes, looking a little green when he spoke again. The thing is, when you look at this list, I wrote down verbatim everything I remember them saying. And they never once said Grady and Adeline. They always said family. I just assumed since you live with them and Grady's so powerful that it had to be them. But they're not your only family. Everything turned cold as Sophie jumped to her feet. You think they meant my human family? I'm just saying it's possible, but you check on them pretty regularly, so... She shook her head, rubbing the knot under her chest to keep her panic at bay. I haven't in a while. There's been so much going on, I forgot, and... She ran inside, with Fitz and Keith right behind her as she sprinted up the stairs and dug her round silver spy ball out of her desk drawers. Show me Connor, Kate, and Natalie Freeman, she whispered, using her family's new names. The spy ball flashed warm in her hands before red letters blazed across it. 2 terrifying words. Not found. That concludes chapter 82. I'll see you tomorrow to finish the book, I think.